Good morning, everybody. Give it a second for everyone to make sure their audio is connected. Thank you so much for being here. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the 2025 CASBO Legislative Wrap-Up. We appreciate you being here this morning. A few housekeeping items before we jump in with the content. This webinar is being recorded. You will be sent a recording of the webinar along with the slides later today. We ask that you direct any questions to the Q&A portion of Zoom so we can keep track of those and make sure we get them answered for you today if we can, and if not, we will be able to follow up with you more easily. Let's jump in. I want to start by introducing our great team of panelists here today. We'll start with CASBO's president, Aaron Hines. He is Deputy Superintendent of Administrative Services at Colusa County Office of Education. Thanks for being here, Aaron.
Thank you,
We
Sarah.
also have CASBO's Legislative Committee Chair, Laura Lilly. She's the Director of Fiscal Services at San Juan Unified in her day job. We're thrilled that you're here with us today, Laura. And joining her is CASBO's Legislative Committee Assistant Chair, Chris Delahanty, who is Assistant Superintendent of Business Services in Del Mar Union School District. Thank you all. We're excited to have you. I am Sarah Petrowski, CASBO's Chief Governmental Relations Officer. I'm here with Michelle Gill, our Director of Policy and Advocacy. Michelle and I are going to be providing you with kind of the facts of what happened during this last legislative session. And Aaron, Laura, and Chris are going to be able to provide you with their insights, their commentary from the perspective of school business leaders.
Hi everyone, so just taking a quick look at the agenda, just quickly covering what this webinar will cover is 3 topics. First is CASBO's Governmental Relations team, second, key legislation from 2025 year, and third is a quick preview of what is ahead. So starting with the CASBO Government Relations team, we have 3 professional and full-time government relations and advocacy staff. First right here is Sarah Petrowski on the left, our Chief Governmental Relations Officer, and Sarah started exactly a year ago. Yesterday was her first year anniversary. In the middle is myself, Michelle Gill, Director of Policy and Advocacy with CASBO, and I started in November of 2022. And last but not least, we have Veronica Molina. She is our legislative analyst, and Veronica started in March of 2023. So CASBO's Legislative Committee, the governmental relations staff are partners with 2 key committees with CASBO members, and first is Legislative Committee. Legislative Committee has representatives from all over the state. Each section has their representative, and then we also have members at large. What the Legislative Committee does is we meet 5 times a year, and together we work very closely to vet budget proposals and policy. In this photo on the left, you can see those are central section members during advocacy days meeting with Assemblymember Jeff, Senate Assemblywoman Irwin. Sorry, Petrie Norris. We met with so many members and I'm just all over the place about that. But yes, for advocacy days this year, we had 55 meetings in 2 days. So we met with a lot of legislators, a lot of consultants, and also we met with the State Board of Education. Laura Lilly was there, Chris was there too, and so was Aaron. So Laura and Chris, if you want to share anything about the Legislative Committee, you both have been part of that team, please.
Yeah, I would just share that I think you can see just from this list here of what a vast difference of backgrounds we have on the committee and how great that really is for us on this committee, because I think there's things that impact different LEAs differently. And so being able to do that. And then there's also some things that are an impact the same way to all of us. So I think that this cross section of folks, it's really a great, it allows us to really analyze what's happening and see as much as we can of how it will impact LEAs all across the state.
Yeah, I think Laura nailed it. And the fact that we have this broad spectrum, and when we all come to the table, we're looking at what is the greater good for all school districts across the state. And the impact we're able to have when we're up in the Capitol doing those 2 days of advocacy is something that really has brought a lot of pride for me, because we're able to see an impact at the end of the year when we come to meetings like this, and we're able to look at the um, what we've been able to do over the course of the year. So it comes from all the work we have across the state with people supporting us, but this team really does make a big impact.
One last thing I'd like to point out too is you'll see the wide variety of districts that we cover. We cover large, small, charter schools, and that's what helps provide the depth and the breadth of the discussions when we have new bills come across our desk and how they're going to affect everyone.
Exactly. Thank you, everyone. And the second committee we work with, Advocacy Network Committee. So Advocacy Network Committee is a more boots on the ground, more local. They meet with legislators, and their key duties per se would be to introduce CASBO to their local legislators, local elected officials, share CASBO's priorities, and then also build awareness of the context for their for their local LEAs. The goal of Advocacy Network Committee is to build trust. So when the budget and legislation are being discussed in the Capitol, legislators know to reach out to CASBO as a trusted organization. In this photo, you can see on the left is Assemblymember Jeff Gonzalez. This is also during our advocacy days. You can see Gary Stein, Paula, Zubia, and Katie. These are our members from the Eastern section. And again, during advocacy days, 55 meetings in 2 days. Yeah.
All right, so 2025 was a really busy and productive year for CASBO's governmental relations team, and we wanted to share some of the photo highlights of the year to give you a sense of some of the key work that we do for CASBO and in partnership with our legislative team and our ANC members. So the first photo on the far left of the screen, we numbered these so you can see the one in the top corner. That's a photo of me at a press conference with Senator Sasha Renee Perez, trying to gain support for SB 848, which was a bill about keeping students safe and preventing childhood sexual assault on school campuses. Senator Perez took the recommendations from the FCMAT report on AB 218 from last winter and put them into her bill and moved them forward throughout the year. CASBO's legislative committee was an early supporter of the recommendations from that FCMAT report and of SB 848. And we were proud to stand alongside her here with some of our colleagues from AXA, the Riverside County Office of Education, and survivors of childhood sexual assault in making sure that this bill did cross the finish line in the final days of session. The great news is that this bill was successful and was signed by the governor, and we are looking forward to this being implemented not only to keep students safe, but to also make sure that these crimes are not happening in the first place so that school districts do not face the liabilities associated with these crimes in the future, affecting their school budgets. The second photo, top center, is Michal testifying in one of this year's many committee hearings. Committee hearings are a primary way that we share CASBO's position and perspective on the legislation moving through the legislature. There are weeks where Michal and I spend most of our days sitting in committee hearings, waiting to stand up and either offer 2 minutes of of testimony or to just come up to the microphone and say CASBO supports or opposes this bill. It's an opportunity for us to make sure that everyone is aware of the positions the legislative committee has taken on the various bills. And it also gives us the opportunity to hear the discussions that members of the legislature and other interest holders are having related to the legislation moving. The third photo, center bottom, is Michal standing alongside Assemblymember Valencia and our colleagues who are co-sponsors of AB 1224. This was a bill that we sponsored with the other education management groups this year related to extending the amount of time that substitute teachers are allowed to be in the classroom. This was an amazing team effort. Assemblymember Valencia was an amazing champion of this bill. We had widespread support for the legislation as it moved through this year. Unfortunately, the governor did veto this bill when it came to his desk. And we are continuing conversations about how we can provide relief to local educational agencies as they face the continued teacher shortage and need some immediate solutions as we work through the long-term teacher supply issues and the various programs that we have in the state to visit with our San Diego Imperial section last May. This was an amazing event. Chris was there with us, along with a number of other CBOs from the San Diego Imperial section, where we got the opportunity to sit down with Assemblymember Alvarez, talk to him about the budget and show him the after-school program, the extended learning program in Chula Vista Unified at Rice Elementary. It was a great way to show him the on-the-ground impact of the decisions that he makes in Sacramento as chair of the Assembly Budget Subcommittee on Education. We had some great back and forth with him during the day, and we're able to really share the perspective of school business leading up to those final budget decisions. I know, Chris, since you were there, is there anything else you would want to add about that day with Assemblymember Alvarez?
I just would say that it's a great example of what we can do in working with the advocacy network and our legislative committee and the support of the governmental relations team and bringing this together. I think these are the things we want to do more of to make sure that we're connecting with our elected officials and building those relationships and being able to share what their decisions and how they're going to impact our schools.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. And finally, the last picture, number 5 in the bottom corner, that is Virginia. Sarah, our legislative committee member, standing alongside Senator Monique Limon. We had, Maria there from our Advocacy Network Committee is also with them. They met with her during advocacy days in the spring. These are the days Michal has already mentioned, where we had over 50 meetings in the Capitol with members of the legislature, sharing CASBO's budget priorities, educating them about school business, and becoming trusted partners for them on the decisions that they are making throughout the legislative year. So that is some of the highlights, the various ways we are working to advance CASBO's priorities throughout the year. And we are going to tell you a little bit more now about the great successes that we had over the course of the year. So this year, there were a total of 2,833 pieces of legislation introduced in the legislature. CASBO, our legislative committee, took positions on 41 of those bills. 11 of those bills made it to the governor's desk, 2 that we had opposed positions on, and 9 that we had support positions on. Of those bills that reached the governor's desk, 7 of the 9 bills that we supported were signed into law, and 0 of the 2 bills that we opposed were signed into law. So like I said, it was an amazing year. We had great successes, really engaged members on a number of these bills that helped us both push the ones we supported forward and make sure that the concerns that we had with the ones we opposed were heard, so that we could influence the outcome of those. So some quick summaries of the bills that we supported that were signed into law, with some key facts that you need to know about these bills. The first bill, AB 361, by Assemblymember Schultz, is related to best value procurement. This bill permanently authorizes the Los Angeles Unified School District to use best value procurement. They were in a trial period with this procurement methodology. And it also establishes a pilot program for all other local educational agencies and County Office of Education to use best value procurement for construction projects over $1 million until December 31st of 2030. The next bill, AB 503 by Assemblymember Gonzalez, is related to the Civic Center Act. This bill permanently restored provisions of the Civic Center Act that expired on January 1st of 2025. And you know that this is a key provision that allows school districts to continue recovering the direct costs associated with the use of non-classroom school facilities and grounds. One important thing about this bill is that it contained an urgency clause, which means it goes into effect immediately. We do not have to wait for the typical January 1st deadline for this new law to become active. Next, we have AB 606. This bill creates a preliminary PPS credential so that out-of-state applicants with a credential based on a preparation program can be hired in California schools while they complete any of their remaining requirements for a clear credential. We see this as a key way to support the educator shortage that we have in California, if we have any qualified educators moving from out of state. Next is AB 629 by Assemblymember Ward. This bill increases the equipment threshold for district inventory systems from the current $500 to $1,500, and also builds in a inflation adjustment that the California Department of Education will do on a biannual basis. This bill was sponsored by our friends at the Riverside County Office of Education and San Diego Unified, so we're really grateful for their leadership on this important issue to update that equipment inventory threshold that hasn't been updated in decades. Next, we have AB 962 by Assemblymember Hoover. This is what we call cleanup legislation. It authorizes the prohibition in the case of emergency or in response to a perceived threat of danger, when a school has a comprehensive school safety plan that addresses the use of cell phones on campus. Like I said, this is a follow-up to Assemblymember Hoover's previous bill, AB 3216 from 2024, which allowed LEAs to adopt policies that limit or prohibit the use of smartphones on campus. So this is just clarifying in nature and makes it clear that if you have a policy that speaks to the use of cell phones in cases of emergencies, that is allowed. Next, SB 374 by Senator Archuleta. This is a bill that removes a reporting requirement, which I know we're all very excited about. Specifically, this bill repeals the IDEA addendum, which was an additional component of the Local Control and Accountability Plan that was set to go into effect in the 27-28 school year. This IDEA addendum became unnecessary due to recent changes with the Local Control and Accountability Plan instructions. And we have been trying to draw a lot of awareness about unnecessary and duplicative reporting requirements, which this one was. California School Boards Association sponsored this bill. We supported it throughout the process and are thrilled that it has gone into effect before that new reporting requirement was set to be required for our local educational agencies. And finally, as I already mentioned with one of our pictures from the year, SB 848 by Senator Perez establishes new requirements to improve pupil safety by addressing school employee misconduct, clarifying professional boundaries, enhancing comprehensive school safety plans, expanding child abuse prevention training requirements, requiring instructional programming on abuse and prevention, and creating a statewide system for tracking employee misconduct for classified staff. Like I mentioned earlier, this bill moved forward those FCMAT recommendations, and we are thrilled that this was signed into law to support our work in keeping students safe and minimizing any lawsuits associated with this type of misconduct on school campuses. So that was our signed legislation for the year. We were thrilled that we had 7 bills that we supported become enacted in law. And we would love to hear from you all if there's anything here that you think that we need to discuss in terms of implementation in future webinars. We want to make sure we're providing you with in-depth information that you need to be able to see these new laws implemented in your school district. We'll provide contact information at the end of the webinar where you can reach out and let us know about that. With that, I'll turn it over to Michelle to talk about the legislation that was vetoed by the governor.
Thank you, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned, we have 2 opposed bills and total of 4 bills that CASBO positioned on were vetoed. 2 opposed bills and 2 were our support bills. So starting with the first bill that was vetoed by the governor was AB 374 by Assemblymember Nguyen. This was an opposed bill. So what this bill would have done is required public school employers to provide only classified school employees with certain itemized information regarding their wages at the time of each payment, either by having a printed copy for them, or by it being a detachable part of their paycheck, or by creating a safe employee portal. So CASBO, we brought this bill up to our members, and they did such an amazing job providing key information about the cost of implementation. With the help of our members, we got really diverse LEAs and how much it would cost, and the cost looked different for every single LEA. And Laura, you were really helpful for this bill also, so if you would like to share anything.
Yeah, I would just share that, I think on its face, we didn't realize how costly this really would be until we really started reaching out and talking to the people on the legislative team and talking about what this really would mean and what that lift might look like for a lot, particularly small LEAs, and that would have really impacted them in a negative way. And it was great that we ended up getting this one through as a
and the interesting thing about this bill was that it wasn't marked fiscal till CASBO really started sharing data and facts information from our members. And that's when Department of Finance got involved, and also the appropriations committees in both houses. And in the veto message, we can also see that Governor Newsom does talk about the cost of implementation for this bill.
Michelle, can I just say quickly, I think this is an example of where when we really live the things we say about CASBO all the time, that we are a data-driven, fact-focused organization, and we really can make a difference in the outcomes of these bills. The information that Michelle worked with Laura and other CASBO members to collect and share back with the legislature dramatically influenced the outcome of this one. And I think it's a lesson that in the future, when we can come to the table with the facts, with the data that shows the impact of bills on LEAs, if were to be signed and needed to be implemented, we have a lot that we can do with that information. So thank you to everybody who contributed to this, and thank you to Michelle for her leadership on this one.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, our members, for this. Yep. So the second bill that was vetoed by the governor was also an opposed bill, SB 414 by Senator Ashby. So this bill would have made changes to the oversight, auditing, and funding systems for non-classroom-based charter schools. It would have updated and expanded audit procedures for all local education agencies. It would have created a new Office of Education Inspector General to investigate fraud and financial mismanagement, and would have also made changes to the funding determination processes. Some background about SB 414 is that CASBO was part of a coalition of authorizers pushing for improvements in oversight as a key component of preventing and detecting fraud, in some cases at charter schools. Because SB 414 ultimately did not comprehensively address those requests, despite the best efforts during negotiations on the bill, CASBO and Coalition opposed SB 414. Governor Newsom vetoed this bill, stating that the provision fell short of achieving meaningful reforms to address the high-profile fraud cases involving non-classroom-based charter schools. Now, moving forward to the two support bills that were vetoed by the governor was by AB 699 by Assemblymember Stefani. What this bill would have done is it would have required certain bond and tax measures to be on your local tax information voting guide instead of being on the voter ballot. So many times when taxes and bonds are being voted on, there's not enough clarification, and this bill would have provided more information on that. Unfortunately, this bill was vetoed, but we were happy to support this bill. On AB 1224, this by Assemblymember Valencia, this was a CASBO co-sponsored bill. We had a really good coalition with AXA, California County Superintendents, CASBO, and CSBA. We were all four co-sponsors of this bill. And what this bill would have done is that allow our local education agencies to assign a permitted or credentialed substitute teacher to the same classroom for up to 60 cumulative days instead of 30 days. So, but under specific conditions, it would have established requirements for governing board notice and reporting when substitute serves beyond 30 days. And there was also training parts added to the bill also. Other key facts was that CASBO and our other co-sponsors worked really hard to get this bill to the governor's desk. We only had one no vote out of 120 legislators. And towards the end of session, we visited over 90 legislative offices, helping them answer any questions or concerns that they would have had, and also sharing the need for this bill. We are going through a severe staff shortage in California right now, and this bill would have really helped us. Unfortunately, as Sarah shared before, it was vetoed, but we will continue having conversations.
I would just jump in and say, Michelle, that one was just a heartbreaker of one to to lose and not get. I guess I wanted to point out how hard that the work behind the scenes was to add amendments to make it more palatable, whatever we could do to get this through. So, but yeah, a heartbreaker for sure.
Yes, and thank you, Laura. We're so grateful that it was just a really quick process, that sometimes it was just even a quick text to Laura that Laura will be sending you amendments. Can you help us take a look at this? So just a lot of quick movements of getting this bill to the governor's desk. So thank you. So those are the bills that ended up at the governor's desk, but there were other CASBO position bills that did not reach the governor's desk or reached it in a significantly amended form. So you can see there are 5 of those bills. The first batch of bills are about reporting requirement. AB 862 and AB 862 and SB 399 were held in the Appropriations Committee, and SB 472 was amended to remove the original reporting requirements. All three of these bills would have created a duplicative and burdensome new requirements for LEAs, and we were allowed voice in the need to ensure that the maximum number of resources are used for students and classrooms and not unnecessary reporting. The second bill you can see in the middle is AB 1331 by Assembly El Hawari. This bill would have limited the use of security cameras on school campuses. We know that these cameras help with campus safety, and reconfiguring these systems can be really costly. We worked really closely with a statewide coalition and really raised concerns that we had with so many legislators, consultants, and ultimately this bill was held during the last week of session, and it's not being moved forward. Lastly is AB 942 by Assemblywoman Calderon. This bill has three components. So this bill would have made changes to the net energy metering customer generating arrangements. First, it sunsets the legacy NEM contracts after 10 years. Secondly, it would have required new property owners inheriting solar systems to take services under the current, not the inherited NEM tariff. And third, it would have ended the climate credit allocations to NEM customers starting on January 1st, 2026. So CASBO was, our members really reached out. They really shared concerns about this bill, and CASBO, along with other education agencies and organizations, met with the author. And when we met with her, we really shared our concerns and how this bill would negatively impact our schools. This was a really good experience where we really saw that we were able to educate a legislator where she had no idea about what this bill would have done to our schools. During the meeting, she told us that, this bill will be amended and she wants to work with us. And ultimately, this bill was amended drastically and is not the same piece of legislation anymore. So this really just showcased that our members share so much good information, and this was a really good opportunity to educate legislators too.
I think that's like another good example of one where, us coming together and sharing an impact. And sometimes it's education for our legislators because they aren't intending to impact schools, but the unintended consequence is something that we need to make sure we're coming out and sharing and making sure that they're aware of before it gets put into law.
Definitely. One thing to make sure we're all keeping in mind as we talk about the bills that didn't make it through this year, we had the wind at our back this year. Unfortunately, the state was not in the best of financial conditions. And if you took a look through all of the governor's veto messages this year, there was a pretty constant refrain around vetoing legislation that had high cost because he was proud of the balanced budget that he had worked on with the legislature, and any of these bills that were not considered as part of the budget process would have added fiscal pressure for the state. And so we were definitely supported in being able to stop some of these bills or amend some of these bills this year because of those fiscal considerations. But that is not always going to be the case. And so we need to continue thinking about ways to advocate around stopping new requirements or unnecessary things from being added to the plates of local educational agencies, even in years where the state is in a better financial situation. And so we don't want to lose sight about the support that the fiscal considerations give to us when we are in more challenging budget times and have a governor that is interested in making sure that we are acting in a fiscally responsible way. So it was great to use this year to really share about those impacts from a cost perspective, and looking forward, we'll need to think about how to share our concerns even when we can't rely on cost being the primary driver for opposition. All right, so moving away now from the bills that CASBO had positions on, there are a number of other pieces of legislation that were signed into law this year that we think it is important for you to be aware of as they go into effect in the future. So the first group of bills are all related to immigration enforcement in schools. This was a hot topic this year in the California state legislature. And I want to go through these bills and give you a brief overview of what each of them do as you think forward to implementation. The first is SB 98 by Senator Perez, and this is really the Immigration Enforcement Notification Bill, which requires all local educational agencies to amend their school safety plans over the next few years to include procedures for notifying parents, guardians, teachers, administrators, and other personnel if there are immigration enforcement activities happening on a campus. So that is going to require everybody to update those school safety plans with those new procedures. The second bill is related to immigration enforcement on school sites, known as the California Safe Haven School Act. And this bill really clarifies what the responsibility of local educational agencies and their staff are when immigration enforcement personnel show up on a school campus. This makes it clear that unless the officer presents a valid judicial warrant, subpoena, or court order, they cannot enter the campus, and make sure that all employees are barred from disclosing or providing student educational records or personal information about a student or their family to immigration enforcement officials. So this is one that will require likely some training and thinking through how you are going to make sure that all front office staff at a school district, for example, is aware of these new requirements. The third bill is AB 495. This is known as the Family Preparedness Act of 2025, and it makes changes to what is known as the Caregiver's Authorization Affidavit. It allows people it changes the definition of a relative to include somebody who has an affinity within the 5th degree of kinship. That's the official legislative language, and all relatives whose name is preceded by great to serve as a child's caregiver in the instance that during the course of a day while that child is at school, their parents were detained by immigration authorities. This is in response to some instances where a child has not been picked up from school because of immigration activities, and making sure that there is a relative or kin that is able to take that student home at the end of the day if their parents are unavailable. Finally, AB 419 is called the Know Your Rights school site posting, and this bill requires all school sites to post the Know Your Educational Rights Immigration Enforcement Action California School Guide at each site. This is something that is provided by the Attorney General, and now this information must be posted at every school site across California. So something for you to think about as you're planning for the future and what materials must be available at all of your campuses. All right, moving on from immigration-related legislation that was signed into law, a couple of other things for everyone to keep in mind. The first is just a reminder that this year's budget included penalties for failing to adopt a local control and accountability plan, or LCAP, by the July 1st deadline. These can be very steep fiscal penalties, including withholding your apportionment. So I want to make sure everyone understands the serious nature of that, but also reassure everybody that in over 10 years of adopting LCAPs around the state, we have only had one local educational agency that has not met that deadline. And so you all should just continue doing the good work that you're doing, engaging your educational partners, taking your local control and accountability plans to your board throughout the spring in preparation for that July 1 budget and LCAP adoption deadline. But do be aware that if things look like you might not meet that deadline, there are, for the first time, immediate penalties for failing to do so. The second is just a reminder about the Student Support and Professional Development Discretionary Block Grant, which was included as part of last year's budget. This is something that we fought for very hard, both as CASBO and with the other education management groups, to make sure that these dollars were fully discretionary, allocated based on average daily attendance, and with minimal reporting requirements. Chris spoke about this quite a bit over the course of the year, and we were grateful to see that the budget did include this discretionary block grant in its full amount with all of those provisions.
And I'd say this is also one where the Senate and Assembly had a different proposal than the governor had, and was a place where this and a couple of our previous block grants that we've had over the last couple of years, the advocacy from CASBO that we've done on the legislative committee, but also when we've asked for calls to action and getting people to get their voices heard, really helps and has really helped us to get these discretionary funds that will support every district in the state.
The next bill that I want to touch on is AB 715, the educational equity. It's an educational equity bill related to anti-Semitism prevention. This bill does a couple of things. It establishes an Office of Civil Rights under the Government Operations Agency at the state and creates anti-Semitism prevention coordinators. It requires local educational agencies that know or have reason to know that instructional or professional development materials were used to violate existing anti-discrimination laws to investigate and remediate the action. It requires instruction and instructional materials to be factually accurate, align with the adopted curriculum and existing standards for instructional materials, and be consistent with accepted standards of professional responsibility. It authorizes the California Department of Education to require specific corrective action to be taken by LEAs and requires specified corrective action to be taken by organizations contracted to provide instruction or professional development materials if they are found to have violated specific provisions of this bill. Of course, CASBO and our other education management organization colleagues support all work that's being done to make sure that students feel safe on campus. But I do want to note this one because concerns were raised about this bill by our colleagues at both AXA and California County Superintendents, who do focus more on the instructional side. Some of the concerns that they raised about this bill is that it can lead to the immediate and permanent removal of instructional materials from your campus, needing to replace those quickly, and there's costs associated with that. There's also creates potential legal liabilities for school leaders around these materials. And so we just want to make sure as school business officials, you're aware of this and that you are having conversations with your colleagues in education services or curriculum and instruction about this bill and its provisions and how that might impact school business should any materials need to be removed or you are working through some of the penalties associated with this. The next bill we want to talk about is AB 1264, by Assemblymember Gabriel, which is called the Real Food Healthy Kids Act. This is a bill that is related to ultra-processed foods and a phased-in approach to removing those foods from school campuses. Our colleagues at Capital Advisors sent out a great summary of this bill, which I'm going to borrow from a little bit to share with you all. So there's several phases of implementation for this one. The first is that the California Department of Public Health has to adopt by June 1st, 2028, in consultation with nutrition people at school districts and other interested parties, regulations to identify and define ultra-processed foods and restricted school foods based on a number of different factors. Second, by July 1st, 2029, schools must begin to phase out restricted school foods and ultra-processed foods that are of concern. Then, beginning July 1st, 2032, AB 1264 would prohibit vendors from offering restricted school foods and ultra-processed foods of concern at a school. And then finally, by July 1st, 2035, an LEA will be prohibited from offering or selling foods or beverages containing these restricted school foods or ultra-processed foods of concern to students. This bill, this obviously is going to have an impact on how we serve school meals, but there was a lot of consideration given with the long lead time into implementing this bill. And it also exempts school meal items provided by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which makes up the majority of school meals. So offering some relief there. That's another one that we're looking at for some additional conversations about implementation in the future. So please be on the lookout for any webinars related to that one. Finally, AB 772 by Assemblymember Lowenthal is going to lead to the adoption of policies by local educational agencies related to cyberbullying that occurs off campus outside of school hours. Some of our colleagues shared concerns about this bill because it really expands the scope of school administrators and monitoring what students are doing outside of school hours off of campus. But the California Department of Education is required to adopt a model policy by next summer. And then by July 1st of 2027, all local educational agencies will need to have a policy in place related to these off-campus cyberbullying activities as well. So those are some of the key things that we thought we should bring to your attention so you can begin conversations in your specific context with your colleagues about how to implement them in the future. I don't know, Laura, Chris, is there anything you might add about considering these new policies?
I just would say with the ultra processed foods, I think that it is an important place where we are gathering input. We've already done some of that work and it'll be an ongoing process, but definitely if you're involved in nutrition services or you have a good director who's a part of that, I'm sure that Sarah and the team will be reaching out, and it's important that we're a part of that conversation so that the implementation of it goes in a manner that we can implement in schools.
Yeah, we're going to want that definition of ultra processed to have some control over what that is and where that ends up. Yes.
Thank you. All right, turn it back over to Michelle to talk about the budget forecast.
Thank you, Sarah. So the next few slides will do just what's looking ahead for budget and policy forecast. So as you can see on this slide on the left is Department of Finance and Legislative Analyst Office predictions. So they are forecasting a persistent future deficit, operating deficit ranging from $10 billion to $20 billion through 2028 to 2029. This indicates future budget problems that would require additional budget balancing decisions. I think we know that California's revenue can be volatile, so we will be monitoring this very closely. On the federal front, right now, education picture is uncertain. Negotiations are ongoing in Congress related to the fiscal year 2026 budget. Cuts have been proposed by the White House and by the House of Representatives. Overall funding proposes a $12 billion cut from fiscal year 2025 levels. That's about 15%. Reductions to Title I by $5.2 billion, and that's around 27%. They are proposing increases to the IDEA grants by $26 million, career and technical education grants by $25 million, and charter schools funding by $60 million. Senate has proposed keeping funding levels the same as fiscal year 2025. Currently, there's no timeline for the resolution of these differences. And finally, H.R. 1, or the One Big Beautiful Bill, made changes to the Medicaid and Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. Their eligibility, they might impact other education programs like the LCFF, which relies on direct certification via these federal programs. So, just sharing that information. And Laura, Chris, or Aaron, if you have anything to share about the budget picture also.
So I would just point out that as we see if we see any changes materialize from the federal budget, is to make sure that you are actively tweaking your MYP, your multi-year projection. It's not only going to affect this year's budget and going through June 30th, but future years as well. So you always want to keep an eye on your out years, make sure that you're able to meet your needs.
So moving on to the policy look ahead, just like these were the bills that stalled this year. You can see some similar bills that we were opposing are also here, or supporting are here too. So we are expecting these bills to potentially come back because next year is the second year of 2 years legislative session. Some bills that we will be closely monitoring are AB 1204 by Assemblymember Alvarez. So this bill amends the local control funding formula, specifically supplemental and concentration funding. Second bill is AB 65 by Assemblywoman Aguiar Curry. What this bill does is for K through 14 employees, it's about paid disability and parental leave for 14 weeks. We'll be closing and keeping a close eye on that bill. Another bill that we just discussed not too long ago is AB 1331 by Assemblywoman Ella Waris about workplace surveillance. We are expecting this bill to come back also, so monitoring this as well. Third is AB 810 by Assemblywoman Irwin. What this bill would have done is, for local governmental agencies, it would have had their internet websites and email addresses changed to .ca.gov. Some amendments were taken, but the author paused the bill and she wants to work on it next year. So we're working, keeping a close eye on this bill as well. Lastly, it is SB 577 by Senator Laird. So SB 577 or other bills looking to address the fiscal impact of AB 218 on local education agencies and other public entities. We are expecting the conversation to continue and bills to come back.
And I think that's an important one that we definitely have advocated for, and it's the other half of the bill that was enacting some of the prevention measures. And so looking at this, that's going to address the financial and fiscal impact that we're seeing both in districts that are being hit by the lawsuits, as well as where we're all feeling it when we look at the insurance premiums and the pay that we're having to do from prior years.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. So this slide, we are sharing the legislative calendar for you for next year. Next year is an election year. It's an even numbered year. So those years are usually 14 days shorter than non-election years. So you can see right here, January 1st are when legislators come back to their office, legislature reconvenes. January 31 is House of Origin deadline for 2-year bills. Just the bills that we shared in the previous slide, if they were held or stalled, author has to move this bill in the same House of Origin by January 31st deadline. On February 20th, you can see that's the bill introduction deadline. All bills have to be introduced by this deadline to move forward next year. Next deadline is May 29th. That is House of Origin deadline. So if an assembly bill that was introduced in the assembly has to move forward to the next house, or else it will not be moving forward and will be stalled. June 5th is our budget deadline. And then August 31st is the last day of session. Again, it's a little bit shorter because that's when legislators have to go back and work on their campaigns for their elections.
All right. Well, to wrap us up as we're getting close to the hour, we want to take a moment to ask you all to consider taking a really important survey. This survey is done in partnership with Jason Willis of WestEd, who is working on an important study that is going to help us understand the cost and the number of hours that school business officials and other education administrators are spending on compliance and administrative activities. To complete this research, Jason needs 2,000 administrators from across California to take a 20-minute survey about your time that is spent on various compliance and reporting activities. This survey is going to contribute to his study that is going to, for the first time ever, give us a statewide look about the time and the cost of these activities. This work is being done as part of the Getting Down to Facts 3 research project, which will be released next spring. This is a really important body of research that has led to significant changes in the past. Just as context, the first iteration of Getting Down to Facts led to the local control funding formula. So this is something that is paid very close attention to by policymakers in California. And Jason will be unable to complete his research if we do not hit that 2,000 mark. And so we are asking everyone on this call, we know you all care very deeply about the explosion in reporting requirements that we have seen in recent years and the amount of time that takes away, the amount of resources that takes away from keeping resources dedicated to students in the classroom. We're asking you all to take this 20-minute survey, to ask your staff to take this 20-minute survey, and to share this with any of your colleagues in different departments around your LEA. Who maybe haven't heard about it yet. CASBO has been we've been very early in asking our members to participate. And so please share this with your colleagues in addition to asking your staff to take it. This data can contribute to significant policy changes in the future, but we're not going to be able to see that if we do not all give this 20 minutes required to help Jason meet the numbers that he needs to have a valid and reliable data set to complete his research. And so you're going to hear from us over the next couple of weeks. I heard on Monday that 130 administrators had completed the survey. That's just over 5%. So we have a long way to go to really support Jason in this work and to make sure that we have actionable data that is going to support our advocacy efforts around decreasing the reporting burden on LEAs. You can scan the QR code on this screen. There's also a live link on CASBO's homepage. There's a banner at the top that you can click on. So please give us these 20 minutes so that we can really make a difference in this policy area. With that, the last slide has our contact information. I've tried to answer as many of the questions in the chat as possible. There are a number here that we'll need to do a little bit of work to get the answers to for you all. Some of the questions about AB 495, I want to make sure I'm giving you the right information. So we'll take those questions and we'll send you an email responding to them. But thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you sticking with us for the full hour. We hope this has been helpful. And if any questions come up about the bills that we talked about today or any other bills that you know are going to be or that are going to go into law next year, never hesitate to reach out to myself, Michelle, or Veronica. We'd be happy to help you. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.